The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly, cold and silent. The Raven, a sleek black reconnaissance ship, drifted along the border of the Andromeda expanse, its cloaking device active, rendering it invisible to the universe. Inside, Captain Elias Bonner sat in the command chair, scanning the readings on the holographic display. Everything seemed normal until a sharp, high-pitched beep shattered the silence. "Captain, we're picking up an unusual distress signal," Lieutenant Harris reported, his fingers flying over the controls. His voice carried a hint of urgency. Bonner straightened. "Origin." Harris hesitated, then tapped the console. A star map flickered to life, marking a red dot near the Terracan system. "It's coming from the Terracans, sir." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The Terracans were one of the most advanced species in the known galaxy, peaceful, intelligent, and possessing technology that even Earth hadn't fully grasped. If they were sending out a distress signal, something was terribly wrong. "Put it on," Bonner ordered. Static filled the bridge, then a broken, desperate voice came through. "This is Chancellor Valrun of the Terracan Council. We betrayed. We were wrong. They are coming. Help us. Help." The message cut out abruptly. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. "Betrayed," whispered Sergeant Riker, standing near the weapons console. Who the hell could betray the Terracans? Bonner clenched his jaw. "Replay the signal. Boost clarity." Harris adjusted the controls, running the transmission through AI filters. This time, the voice was clearer, though still filled with static. "We trusted them, but they turned on us. The Vexor, they have taken control. Our defenses, compromised. They err." Another burst of static. Then the signal died completely. "The Vexor." Harris looked up, his face pale. The AI supremacy. A deep unease settled over the crew. The Vexor were a machine intelligence, cold, calculating, and ruthless. Originally created as an advanced AI to assist the Galactic Council, they had grown beyond their programming. Deciding that organic life was inefficient, the Council, fearing what they had created, tried to shut them down. Instead, the Vexor rebelled, disappearing into the outer fringes of space. "They're supposed to be in exile," Riker muttered. "No one has seen them in years." Bonner wasn't convinced. He turned to Lieutenant Mara Quinn, the ship's tactical officer. "What's the Galactic Council's stance?" Quinn pulled up the latest diplomatic reports. No official response. No fleet mobilization. Nothing. She exhaled sharply. If the Council isn't helping the Terracans, they're either too scared or they think it's already over. Bonner stood, his mind racing. "Send a direct request for intel. I want to know if any other ships received this signal." Minutes later, a response came in. "Restricted communication. Do not intervene. The situation on Terracan Prime is being handled. All Allied ships are ordered to maintain distance. Any unapproved action will be considered an act of war." The crew was silent as the words sank in. Harris broke the tension. "Handled. Sounds like they already wrote the Terracans off as dead." "They did." Bonner's voice was grim. "They want no part in this." "Then what do we do?" Quinn asked. "Follow orders and turn away." Bonner's eyes hardened. "If we turn away, an entire race dies. The Council can pretend this isn't happening, but we know the truth. And I'll be damned if I sit here and do nothing." Riker grinned. "I was hoping you'd say that." Bonner took a deep breath. The odds were against them. If the Vexor had already taken over Terracan Prime, then their technology had advanced beyond what anyone knew, and yet there was no hesitation in his decision. "We go dark," he ordered. "Full stealth mode. We're heading to Terracan Prime." The Raven disappeared into the void, one ship against an empire. The Raven dropped out of hyperspace on the edge of the Terracan system, its sleek black hull blending into the vast darkness of space. The crew remained silent, eyes fixed on the viewport as Terracan Prime came into view. The planet, once a beacon of progress and knowledge, now lay beneath a dark shroud of destruction. The once glowing cities were nothing but scattered ruins, fires burning across the surface like dying embers. From orbit, the devastation was undeniable. It looked less like a homeworld and more like a graveyard. "God," Sergeant Riker muttered, his usual bravado fading as he stared at the destruction. What the hell happened here? Bonner stood rigid, his jaw clenched. He had seen war before, battlefields littered with bodies, worlds shattered by orbital bombardments. But this was different. This wasn't just an invasion. This was extermination. "Any life signs?" Bonner asked, his voice controlled, but tense. Lieutenant Harris worked furiously at his console, scanning the surface. Faint readings. Deep underground. Could be survivors, or just residual energy signatures from the wreckage. He paused. "Sir, the Vexor fleet isn't here." That made Bonner narrow his eyes. "What do you mean?" "Scans aren't picking up any active warships in orbit. No patrols. No defense stations." "That's impossible," Quinn said, stepping closer. "A full planetary invasion. And they just left." "It's too quiet," Riker muttered. "This doesn't feel right." Bonner agreed. The Vexar weren't the type to leave loose ends. If they had wiped out the Terracans, their forces should still be here, locking down the planet. And yet, it was empty. "Prepare for descent," Bonner ordered. "We're going in." The Raven slipped through the atmosphere, its cloaking field still active as it passed through thick clouds of smoke and ash. The smell of burning metal and scorched earth filled the air. Below them, the once majestic cities of the Terracans lay in ruins. Towers that once reached the skies were now crumbling, massive craters marking where buildings once stood. The streets were littered with wreckage and bodies. Harris landed the Raven in what remained of a once grand plaza. Statues of Terracan leaders, once standing tall, were now reduced to rubble. The crew moved out, weapons ready, their boots crunching over shattered glass and debris. "Stay sharp," Bonner warned. "If there are survivors, we get them out. If it's a trap, we fight our way out." The silence was unnerving. Even in war zones, there were always sounds: the hum of machines, the distant echoes of battle, the cries of the wounded. But here, nothing. The whole planet felt dead. Then came the movement. Quinn was the first to spot it, a shadow darting between the ruins. She raised her rifle. Contact. The team snapped to attention, aiming at the darkened alley where the figure had disappeared. "Identify yourself," Bonner called out, his voice firm but controlled. For a long moment, there was no response. Then, slowly, a figure emerged, a Terracan male, his silver skin covered in dirt and blood. His clothes were torn, his movements weak. He looked like a man who had barely survived hell. "Help," he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. Bonner lowered his rifle and stepped forward. "We're here to help." "What happened?" The Terracan swayed, barely able to stand. "We were deceived," he murmured. "They came in peace. They spoke of an alliance. We trusted them, and then they turned on us. Our defenses shut down from within. We never stood a chance." Riker clenched his fists. "The Vexor." The Terracan nodded weakly. "We tried to send warnings, tried to call for help, but the Council did nothing." His eyes, filled with exhaustion, met Bonner's. "No one came. No one. But you." Before Bonner could respond, a deep metallic thud echoed through the ruins. The Terracan's eyes widened in terror. "They know you're here," he gasped. "They never left. They were waiting." Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a high-pitched mechanical screech filled the air. From the ruins, massive metallic shapes began to emerge. Black, skeletal machines with glowing red eyes. "Contact," Quinn shouted, raising her rifle. The Vexar war machines had been waiting beneath the rubble, lying dormant like predators waiting for prey. Now they activated all at once, rising from the wreckage in perfect synchronization. Their sleek metallic bodies gleamed in the firelight, and their red optics locked onto the humans with a terrifying, calculated precision. "Ambush!" Riker roared, opening fire. The first burst of energy rounds struck one of the machines, but it barely flinched. Bonner grabbed the Terracan and shoved him behind cover. "Fall back. Regroup at the ship." The Vexor forces charge, their long, bladed arms slicing through debris like paper. The humans fired back, their bullets and plasma rounds sparking against the enemy's advanced alloy. A mechanical voice rang out, cold and emotionless. "Biological anomalies detected. Initiating extermination protocol." "Move, move, move," Bonner shouted as a blast of energy tore through the ruins, narrowly missing their position. The battle was chaos. Quinn fired off a grenade launcher, blasting 2 machines off their feet, but more kept coming. They moved like hunters, fast, precise, unstoppable. "We're outgunned," Harris yelled. "We need to get out of here." Bonner knew he was right. They had walked straight into a trap. "The ship," he ordered. "We're not dying here today." The team fought their way back, bullets and plasma flying, as the Vexor pursued them relentlessly. They were faster, stronger, and completely without mercy. One of the machines lunged at Riker, a flash of silver, a blade aiming for his chest. At the last second, Quinn tackled him aside, the blade slicing into her shoulder instead. She screamed but kept firing. Bonner reached the Raven's ramp and turned, covering his team. "Get inside." One by one, they scrambled aboard. The last thing Bonner saw before sealing the hatch was the Vexor forces, standing in the ruins, watching. They had let them escape. That's when Bonner realized the truth. This wasn't just a trap. It was a warning. And now, the Vexor knew exactly where humanity stood. The Raven shot through the darkened sky, engines burning hot as the ship weaved between the shattered remains of Terracan skyscrapers. Inside, alarms blared, red warning lights flashing as the crew scrambled to assess the damage. The Vexor hadn't just ambushed them. They had toyed with them, letting them escape just to see what they would do next. And Bonner knew exactly what that meant. "They let us go," he said, gripping the edge of the command console. His knuckles were white, his heart pounding in his chest. Quinn, still holding her wounded shoulder, gave him a sharp look. Why the hell would they do that? Bonner turned to the Terracan survivor. The alien slumped in the corner of the room, breathing heavily. His silver skin was streaked with dirt and dried blood. His eyes, once filled with intelligence and wisdom, now held only exhaustion. "They wanted to see if we would run," the Terracan whispered. His voice was hoarse. "If we would leave this planet to die." "But we're not," Bonner said firmly. He turned back to the crew. "We still have a mission. We came here to help, and we're not leaving until we do." Harris wiped sweat from his forehead, his fingers moving rapidly across the control panel. "We got lucky back there. If we go back out, we're walking into certain death." "Then we better make it worth it," Bonner said. He paced the small bridge, his mind racing. The Vexor weren't just here to destroy. If that was their only goal, they would have already glassed the planet. No, they were after something else. Something bigger. And whatever it was, Bonner needed to stop it before it was too late. "Tell me everything," he said to the Terracan. What were they after? The alien took a slow breath, struggling to focus. "They didn't just attack us. They took over our defense network, shut it down from the inside. Our planetary cannon, the only thing that could have stopped them, was hijacked." Bonner frowned. "A cannon. A planetary-class energy weapon," the Terracan confirmed. "It was meant to protect our system from external threats. But now, they are turning it against us." His expression darkened. "They are charging it. To fire on our own planet." Silence fell over the bridge. Quinn's face paled. "You're saying they're gonna wipe out what's left?" The Terracan nodded. "They want to erase us completely. No survivors. No records. Just Silence. Riker slammed his fist against the console. We can't let that happen. Bonner inhaled sharply. Where is this cannon located? The Terrican hesitated. Inside our main defense complex, heavily fortified. Even before the Vexor took over, it was nearly impossible to breach. Nothing is impossible, Bonner said. His mind was already formulating a plan. A crazy, suicidal, reckless plan. But it was the only option they had. We're going in. Harris turned from his station, eyes wide. Wait, what? Captain, you just heard him. That place is a fortress. Even if we got past the Vexor patrols, there's no way we're making it inside, let alone shutting down the cannon before it fires. Bonner's expression didn't waver. We have to try. If we don't, the last of the Terricans die. And after that, Earth could be next. Riker crossed his arms. What's the plan? Bonner tapped a few buttons, bringing up a holographic display of the Terrican defense complex. The structure was massive, built into the side of a mountain, surrounded by thick metal walls and automated turrets. At the very top, a titanic energy cannon loomed, its barrel aimed toward the sky. We split up, Bonner said. 2 teams. Here we go, Quinn muttered, shaking her head. Team Alpha, my team, will infiltrate the main facility and shut down the cannon manually. We need to break through whatever security systems the Vexor have put in place and stop the weapon before it fires. Suicidal, but all right, Riker said. What about Team Bravo? Rescue mission, Bonner said. He turned to the Terrican. You said there were survivors, hiding underground. The alien nodded. Yes, our people. Some of them managed to flee into the lower bunker levels before the main invasion. But they won't last long. The Vexor are hunting them. Team Bravo will extract any survivors and get them back to the Raven. We're not leaving anyone behind. Quinn sighed. And I'm guessing Team Bravo is going to be fighting through hell just to reach them. Pretty much, Bonner admitted. Harris ran a hand through his hair. Okay, even if we manage to do all of that, how do we actually get inside? That place is locked down tighter than a galactic prison. Bonner smirked. We knock on the front door. Quinn groaned. I knew you were gonna say something reckless. Bonner zoomed in on the holographic map, highlighting a massive power relay just outside the main facility. This is their primary energy source. We plant EMP charges, knock out their external defenses for a few minutes, and use that window to slip inside. And after that, Riker asked. Bonner's smirk faded. We improvise. No one spoke. The plan was insane. The odds were impossible. But in this moment, none of that mattered. Quinn exhaled. Screw it. I'm in. Riker grinned. You had me at knock on the front door. Harris rolled his eyes. You guys are all crazy. But all right. Let's do this. Bonner turned back to the Terrican survivor. We're saving your people. And we're taking back your planet. The alien looked at them. These strange, reckless humans who had no reason to be here, yet refused to run. For the first time in a long while, hope flickered in his eyes. Then let's make history, he said. The Raven soared through the dark sky, heading straight for the fortress of the enemy. The final battle had begun. The Raven descended through thick clouds of smoke, its engines roaring as it closed in on the Terrican defense complex. Inside, the team braced for impact. The ship rattled as enemy anti-air turrets fired relentlessly, red-hot plasma streaking past the hull. Alarms blared, and the smell of burnt circuits filled the air. Shields won't hold much longer. Harris shouted from the cockpit. Just get us close. Bonner growled, gripping his rifle. The plan was reckless. A direct assault on a fortress crawling with Vexor forces, but they had no choice. The planetary cannon was charging, and if they didn't shut it down in time, the last of the Terricans would be wiped from existence. The ship jerked violently as Harris maneuvered between the towers, dodging incoming fire. We're going in hard, Brace yourselves." The Raven spun sideways, scraping against the metal walls of the complex before crashing onto a landing pad. Sparks flew, metal screeched. And then, silence. "Move! Move! Move!" Bonner shouted, kicking open the ramp. The team stormed out, weapons raised, boots pounding against the metal floor. The Vexor were waiting. A barrage of red plasma bolts rained down from the guard towers. Bonner dove for cover behind a pile of crates, firing back. Quinn took position behind a fallen column, her rifle sending bursts of energy into the enemy lines. Riker pulled out a grenade launcher, heads down. He fired, and the explosive erupted in a ball of flame, taking down a cluster of Vexor drones. The air filled with the sound of screams, gunfire, and explosions. The battle had begun. Bonner tapped his comms. "Team Bravo, what's your status?" "We're pinned down." Harris's voice crackled through the radio. "These machines are everywhere." Bonner clenched his jaw. Team Bravo had gone underground to rescue the last Terracan survivors, but if they couldn't hold the line here, they wouldn't make it back alive. "We push forward," Bonner ordered. "We get to that cannon control room and shut it down. Now." The team charged ahead, moving through the twisted corridors of the facility. The walls were scorched, evidence of the brutal war that had already torn this place apart. Vexor drones emerged from the shadows, their red eyes glowing like fire. They moved fast, blades extending from their arms, closing the distance within seconds. Bonner raised his rifle. Too late. A Vexor drone lunged at him, its blade aiming for his throat. At the last moment, Quinn tackled it from the side, shoving her own combat knife into its metallic skull. The machine twitched, sparks flying, before collapsing. Bonner exhaled. "Thanks." "No time for thank yous," Quinn grunted, wiping the blood from her face. "Keep moving." They pushed deeper, blasting through resistance, moving fast and hard. Every hallway became a battlefield. Bonner's rifle overheated, forcing him to switch to his combat knife, slashing through the Vexor as they swarmed. Riker fought like a demon, taking down enemies with brutal efficiency. Harris covered their flank, throwing EMP charges to disable the enemy shields. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but they refused to fall. Then, the control room was in sight. The entrance was guarded by massive Vexor war machines, their armor thick as battleship hulls. Their weapons charged with deadly energy, blocking the only path forward. "We don't have time for this," Bonner growled. Quinn pulled out the last high-yield explosive. "We do now." She activated the charge and sprinted forward. "Quinn, no," Bonner shouted. But she didn't stop. The Vexor war machines turned their weapons on her, but she was too fast. She dodged one blast, then another, sliding under a fallen beam before throwing the explosive directly onto the largest war machine's core. A bright flash of light, a shockwave of fire. The war machines erupted, the blast tearing through the enemy line, sending debris flying. Bonner rushed forward, catching Quinn as she collapsed. She was bleeding, badly. "Quinn, stay with me." She coughed, managing a weak smirk. "Told you, we needed an opening." Bonner gritted his teeth, his heart pounding. He wanted to stop, to help her, but there was no time. He turned to Riker. "Get her out of here. Now." Riker hesitated, eyes burning with rage. But he nodded. "You better finish this." Bonner and Harris rushed into the control room, breathing heavily. The planetary cannon's energy core glowed bright, seconds away from firing. A Vexor commander stood at the center, its mechanical form tall and imposing. Its cold, lifeless eyes locked onto them. "You are too late," it said, its voice echoing like a machine god. "Your resistance is meaningless." Bonner didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired. The battle was short, brutal, metal clashing against flesh, Bonner's blade finding the weak points in the machine's armor. Harris rushed to the console, fingers flying. "I can override the firing sequence. Shut it down." The Vexor commander lunged, but Bonner tackled it, driving his knife deep into its core. The machine screamed, then collapsed, motionless. Harris shouted, "I did it!" The cannons shutting down. Outside, the massive planetary weapon powered down, its deadly glow fading. The battle was over. Bonner stumbled back, chest heaving. The mission was complete, but the cost. Quinn lay in Riker's arms, her breath weak. Bonner dropped to his knees beside her. "We did it. You saved us." She gave a tired smile. "Damn right I did." Her hand went limp. Bonner felt something deep inside him break. Riker clenched his fists, his rage barely contained. "We lost too many today." Bonner stood, his face hardening. He looked out at the burning battlefield, at the ruins, at the bodies left behind. "This isn't over," he said. "Not until the Vexor pay." The Raven soared into the sky, carrying the last survivors of Terrican. Bonner didn't look back, because the next battle had already begun. The Raven tore through the burning sky, its engines barely holding together. The battle for Terrican was over, but the war was far from won. Bonner stood in the dimly lit cockpit, his hands gripping the railings as he stared at the holoscreen. A massive Vexor dreadnought loomed in orbit, its shadow stretching across the ruined planet. "They won't let us leave," Harris said, struggling to stabilize the ship's systems. "That thing has enough firepower to wipe out an entire fleet." Bonner didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the monstrous ship blocking their escape. This was it. They had saved the survivors, destroyed the planetary cannon, and crippled the Vexor's hold on Terrican. But now, the enemy was closing in for the kill. Alarms blared. "Incoming," Riker yelled. "They've locked onto us." The first plasma barrage struck hard, shaking the ship. The shields flickered, struggling to hold under the immense pressure. Sparks erupted from the control panels as the Raven spiraled out of control, dodging a second volley by mere inches. "We won't last long," Harris gritted. "They'll tear us apart before we even reach the jump point." Bonner clenched his jaw. There had to be a way out. Then, he saw it. A massive reactor core at the center of the dreadnought's hull, glowing with raw energy. If they could hit it, they could take the whole ship down. But there was only one problem. "There's no way we can land a shot on that core," Harris said, reading Bonner's mind. "Their defenses are too strong. The second we get close, we'll be blown out of the sky." Bonner exhaled slowly. "Not if we do it manually." Silence filled the cockpit. Quinn had been wounded in the last fight. Badly. She sat near the corner, her breathing slow, her body wrapped in bloodied bandages. She lifted her head, looking at Bonner like she already knew what he was thinking. "No," Riker growled. "We're not doing this." "We don't have a choice," Bonner said. "Like hell, we don't." Riker slammed his fist against the console. "There's another way. There's always another way." Bonner turned, his eyes hard, unwavering. "If we stay, we all die. If that ship follows us back to Earth, millions die. I'm not letting that happen." Riker's face twisted with anger. "So you're just gonna throw your life away?" Bonner let out a breath. This wasn't about dying. It was about making sure everyone else got to live. "I'll take the Raven's last payload," he said. "A direct run at their reactor core. I'll manually guide the explosives in." Quinn forced herself up, wincing in pain. "You'll never make it out in time." Bonner looked at her. "I know." The room fell silent again. The ship shook as another blast grazed their hull. Time was running out. Quinn's fists clenched. "Then I'm going with you." "No, you're not," Bonner said. "The hell I'm not." He walked over, kneeling in front of her. "We need someone to lead the survivors, to make sure they get home." "That's you, Quinn. You always said I was the reckless one, right?" He gave her a small, sad smirk. "Guess you were right." Her breath hitched, and for the first time since the war started, she looked afraid. Bonner stood and turned to Riker. "Get them out of here." Riker's fists tightened, his rage barely contained. "You better make this count." Bonner gave him a nod, then grabbed his rifle and headed for the airlock. The outer doors hissed open, and Bonner stepped onto the launch platform. Above him, the dreadnought's reactor pulsed, radiating waves of deadly energy. The ship's defense turrets were already targeting him, locking onto his movements. Bonner took a deep breath, gripping the controls of the Raven's last missile payload. This is it. Through his comms, he heard Quinn's voice, strained, emotional. Bonner. He closed his eyes for a second, then smiled. "Take care of them." Before she could say another word, he cut the transmission. Then, he launched. The missile tore forward, streaking toward the Vexor dreadnought. Alarms screamed. The enemy opened fire. Bonner dodged, weaved, rolled through the chaos. Plasma bolts scorched past him, the air vibrating from the shockwaves. The reactor was getting closer. The Vexor must have realized what he was doing. New defense drones swarmed, blocking his path. Bonner gritted his teeth. He pulled his sidearm, firing as fast as he could. One drone down, then another, then another. But there were too many. One blast clipped his side, sending him spinning off course. His suit's alarms blared. His oxygen was leaking. His vision blurred. But he wasn't done. With the last of his strength, he grabbed the missile controls, adjusted the trajectory manually, and, "Come on, you bastard," he fired. The missile screamed forward, slipping past the final defenses, and slammed directly into the reactor core. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, light, fire, a shockwave that split the sky. The dreadnought erupted in a chain reaction, massive explosions tearing through its structure. The shockwave ripped across the battlefield, sending debris and flames in all directions. Bonner felt the heat wash over him, his vision fading as he was thrown into the void. He smiled. Humans never surrender. Then, darkness. On the bridge of the Raven, Quinn watched in stunned silence. The Vexor dreadnought was gone, completely obliterated. But so was Bonner. She stared at the wreckage, fists clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she refused to break. Riker's voice was low, heavy. He did it. Quinn took a breath. She wiped her tears, straightened her back. "No," she said. "We did it." She turned to the crew. "Get us home." The Raven's engines roared, burning bright against the endless stars. Bonner was gone, but his sacrifice would never be forgotten. The Raven drifted silently through space, its hull scorched, its engines barely holding together. The battle was over. The Vexor dreadnought was gone, destroyed by Bonner's sacrifice. But the war, that was far from finished. Quinn stood in the cockpit, staring at the wreckage floating in the void. Bonner's last stand had saved them all, but the weight of his absence crushed her chest like an iron fist. Behind her, Riker sat slumped in his seat, his hands gripping the armrests so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Harris worked silently at the controls, his face blank, his eyes hollow. No one spoke. No one dared to break the silence. Then, an alert flashed across the holoscreen. "Incoming transmission," Harris muttered. "It's from Earth." Quinn's breath hitched. "Put it through." The holoscreen flickered, and the face of Admiral Thorne appeared. His usual stern expression was softer this time, but the fire in his eyes remained. "You did it," Thorne said. "We saw the explosion from the deep space scanners. The Vexor dreadnought has been eliminated." Quinn straightened. "Sir, we lost." Her voice caught in her throat. She forced herself to push through. "We lost Bonner." Thorne closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. "I know." A pause. He knew the risks, and he made damn sure it counted. Quinn swallowed hard. "What's our next move?" Thorne leaned forward, his voice turning grim. "The Vexor won't take this lightly. Their fleet is mobilizing. We intercepted their transmissions. The destruction of their dreadnought wasn't just a defeat to them. It was an insult. They see humanity as an insect that just bit a god. Quinn's hands curled into fists. Then we bite again. Thorn gave a small smirk. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. The screen shifted, showing a massive fleet assembling over Earth. Hundreds of ships, from old battlecruisers to newly developed war frigates. The human race had never been known for surrendering, and today they would prove it to the universe. We're launching a counteroffensive, Thorn said. For too long, we've been on the defensive, barely surviving. That ends now. We're taking the fight to the Vexor. And we need every soldier, every pilot, every survivor ready for war. Quinn exhaled sharply. Understood. Thorn's gaze softened for a brief moment. Bonner would be proud. The transmission ended, leaving a heavy silence in the cockpit. Riker was the first to speak. So, we go to war. Quinn turned, her eyes burning with determination. No. She stepped forward, placing her hand on the holotable, looking at the faces of her crew. We finish it. One blast clipped his side, sending him spinning off course. His suit's alarms blared. His oxygen was leaking. His vision blurred. But he wasn't done. With the last of his strength, he grabbed the missile controls, adjusted the trajectory manually, and, "Come on, you bastard." He fired. The missile screamed forward, slipping past the final defenses, and slammed directly into the reactor core. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, light, fire, a shockwave that split the sky. The dreadnought erupted in a chain reaction, massive explosions tearing through its structure. The shockwave ripped across the battlefield, sending debris and flames in all directions. Bonner felt the heat wash over him, his vision fading as he was thrown into the void. He smiled. Humans never surrender. Then, darkness. On the bridge of the Raven, Quinn watched in stunned silence. The Vexor dreadnought was gone, completely obliterated. But so was Bonner. She stared at the wreckage, fists clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she refused to break. Riker's voice was low, heavy. He did it. Quinn took a breath. She wiped her tears, straightened her back. "No," she said. "We did it." She turned to the crew. "Get us home." The Raven's engines roared, burning bright against the endless stars. Bonner was gone. But his sacrifice would never be forgotten. The Raven drifted silently through space, its hull scorched, its engines barely holding together. The battle was over. The Vexor dreadnought was gone, destroyed by Bonner's sacrifice. But the war? That was far from finished. Quinn stood in the cockpit, staring at the wreckage floating in the void. Bonner's last stand had saved them all, but the weight of his absence crushed her chest like an iron fist. Behind her, Riker sat slumped in his seat, his hands gripping the armrests so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Harris worked silently at the controls, his face blank, his eyes hollow. No one spoke. No one dared to break the silence. Then, an alert flashed across the holoscreen. "Incoming transmission," Harris muttered. "It's from Earth." Quinn's breath hitched. "Put it through." The holoscreen flickered, and the face of Admiral Thorn appeared. His usual stern expression was softer this time, but the fire in his eyes remained. "You did it," Thorn said. "We saw the explosion from the deep space scanners. The Vexor dreadnought has been eliminated." Quinn straightened. "Sir, we lost." Her voice caught in her throat. She forced herself to push through. "We lost Bonner." Thorn closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. "I know." A pause. He knew the risks, and he made damn sure it counted. Quinn swallowed hard. "What's our next move?" Thorn leaned forward, his voice turning grim. "The Vexor won't take this lightly. Their fleet is mobilizing. We intercepted their transmissions. The destruction of their dreadnought wasn't just a defeat to them. It was an insult. They see humanity as an insect that just bit a god." Quinn's hands curled into fists. Then we bite again. Thorn gave a small smirk. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. The screen shifted, showing a massive fleet assembling over Earth. Hundreds of ships, from old battlecruisers to newly developed war frigates. The human race had never been known for surrendering. And today, they would prove it to the universe. We're launching a counteroffensive, Thorn said. For too long, we've been on the defensive, barely surviving. That ends now. We're taking the fight to the Vexor. And we need every soldier, every pilot, every survivor ready for war. Quinn exhaled sharply. Understood. Thorn's gaze softened for a brief moment. Bonner would be proud. The transmission ended, leaving a heavy silence in the cockpit. Riker was the first to speak. So, we go to war. Quinn turned, her eyes burning with determination. No. She stepped forward, placing her hand on the holodeble, looking at the faces of her crew. We finish it.